All right, so I'm John. My full name, John Hamilton Smith V. My artist name that I make music under is Slide20XL. And this is how music works, what musicians do when musicians do music. So, like we kind of mentioned earlier, I decided that I wanted to make video game music when I was 13 years old, and I've kind of been just continuing to pursue it since then. I play piano and viola, and when I was really young, I started teaching myself about music production stuff. Three of my most sort of interesting, notable projects include the soundtrack for EyeWire, which is a massively multiplayer online neuroscience video game that I wrote a collection of ambient electronic music for and did a little bit of sound design for. I did some work for an in-progress sort of short political podcast series called Insane Before the Sun. I did a little bit of avant-garde electronic music, like avant-garde electronic soundscapes, and a little bit of classical music for that. And I also did a little bit of music and sound design for Rec Room by Against Gravity, which is the VR game with the most number of concurrent players in the world. So I have a little bit of experience with everything related to audio and sound, but my main area of expertise is in taking an audio idea of some sort and producing that into a completed audio file that can then be used in a game or put onto Spotify or really whatever. So the inspiration for this talk actually is when I was at GDC. I was talking with a colleague, and I told him that I did music and stuff, and he asked me if I use mainly synthesizers or recorded instruments to produce my music. And my answer to that question was yes. So, we're going to start talking about music production, then we have to talk about MIDI. And MIDI is an acronym that stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. If you have any recollection of, it's also a file format, I could say. So if you have any recollection of listening to MIDI files on your computer, you might remember that they don't sound very good at all. The reason for that is that a MIDI file is actually not a collection of audio data. It's not audio information. It is a set of instructions. It's basically a collection of things that are then being communicated to your computer. Your computer is interpreting that information and then playing it back with the instruments that are installed on your computer, which are not good. So think of a MIDI file as a set of digital instructions or digital sheet music, like MIDI is to sheet music as sheet music is to an orchestra. So say that you have MIDI data, you know about MIDI data now. Let's say that you want instruments that are better than the ones on your computer. Like say you want a piano. That's where we enter the concept of a sampler instrument. So how am I going to get a piano into my computer? Well, one thing that I could do is I could record every single sound that a piano can make and then put all of that sound into my computer and then play it back with the MIDI information, right? So how many sounds can a piano make? Well, the piano has 88 keys, black keys and white keys, and I can play a piano loud, and I can play a piano softly, right? So let's say that I had 5 loudness layers, right? Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Just imagine yourself banging on a piano. Okay, so I have 5 loudness layers, and I have 88 keys. That's essentially 440 individual sound files of just piano notes that I'm playing. So let's see, let me have a look at this 1 second. Okay, 440 discrete audio files. I play the piano, I hold the note, I have a file. Or discrete samples, that's why I would say a sampler instrument. So we take all of these files, all 440 of them, and we put them inside of the computer, or we say, take all of those files, all of those loudness layers, and we map them to a piano-shaped object, or a realistic 3D keyboard. Okay, so I have 440 files, and I have a digital keyboard, like if you've ever seen a digital keyboard, or played with one, I'm sure you have. Essentially, this is the concept. We've recorded all of these different sound files, and then we are triggering them with something that is very much like a piano to create a facsimile of playing a piano, right? So let's go back to MIDI for a second. MIDI is a set of instructions that we can then play or read with, for example, the piano. So what kinds of instructions does a MIDI file have inside of it? Here are a few examples, right? Start playing the note. Note on. Good. Stop playing the note. That's note off. Velocity. That refers to the speed that we're playing the note at. You could imagine me hitting the table slowly or hitting it quickly. Those are the loudness layers that we talked about, or the velocity layers, right? Sustain pedal. If you've played a piano or seen or heard the piano, you know that piano music has a very dreamlike quality to it. And that effect is essentially created when you put your foot down on the pedal on the right side. It's basically, you're basically communicating to the piano, when I play a note, don't stop playing it. And you play a bunch of notes and then you have this like dreamlike thing that happens. Since real pianos can do that, it would be really good if our sampler instrument piano could do it as well, because we want to create something that sounds like real piano music. Okay, and then we have a pitch bend. Ah, that's nice. I like that, right? Let's put that in our music. Okay, so we have MIDI data, and we have the sampled piano instrument. How can we actually create MIDI data, right? We've talked about maybe listening to MIDI files, we've talked about using the data, and we need a way to create it. So that's when we enter into the concept of DAW software, or Digital Audio Workstation software. One of the things that DAW software lets you do is take these sampler instruments. So we take like a sampled piano that we've bought or downloaded or whatever, and we open it up in the DAW, and then we're able to create MIDI data. We say put the piano on a track here, and then we create MIDI data right here. And then maybe we have like 6 piano tracks, all playing different MIDI data, or you know, bass or guitar or whatever. Okay, so we've got multiple tracks, multiple software instruments, create MIDI data, play it all back at once. And these are some examples of DAW software. I've actually also gone ahead and put asterisks next to some of the ones that you may have heard of. GarageBand, I think, is available for free on the Mac App Store. It used to be included with Macintosh computers. FL Studio actually used to be referred to as Fruity Loops. That's another popular one. And Logic is the one I use. Ableton Live is very popular, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's see. This right here is a picture of GarageBand. So if you look down here, we actually can see an example of some very simple MIDI data. There's a piano here telling us which notes that we're playing. And we see, let me see, that's an F, I think this is an E, that's a G. And then we could imagine, you know, hitting play and moving forward through this and creating or hearing that sound play back. We also see that we've got multiple tracks, got a grand piano right here. Let's see, circuit dialogue, probably a synthesizer. Got a saxophone, piano, acoustic bass, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what GarageBand looks like. This is a picture of Logic. Again, we see some similar concepts. We don't have a piano track open at the moment, but we could certainly do that if we wanted to. And we see, again, a collection of different tracks. And also these tiny little sections, I'm gonna refer to those as regions, right? So we have different, you know, pieces of information that are then being played back on the instruments on these tracks. This is a picture of Ableton Live. Looks a little bit different, but again, we see the same concept. We see multiple tracks here, and we do kind of see those MIDI notes that we were talking about earlier. Let's see, what is that? What does that say? Is that a drum? Okay. Drum kits, etc. MIDI, there we go. And this last one here is a picture of Pro Tools. Again, similar concept. We've got a track here, we've got a track right there, and there's another one down here. And you might recognize these as sound waves. We're actually using audio files here. And then this, a little bit more difficult to see, but we again see those tiny little rectangles, and this is actually more MIDI data, right? I really don't like making slides, but I needed a transition, so that's why this is here. So let's go back to the piano. We said that we had 5 velocity layers across 88 keys, so we had essentially 440 samples. That, you know, that's a piano. It's got, you can play it loud, you can play it soft, but you could imagine if we had 880 samples, right? 10 velocity layers. That would give us more discrete, you know, values of loudness that we can use. And we could imagine, say, you know, 1,000 or 10,000 or whatever, right? Because if you think about it, you can, there's infinite, what's the word I would use for this? I can't think of it. But there's like an infinite sort of variety of different loudness and softness layers that you could use to play an instrument. But obviously, after a certain point, there's diminishing returns, right? Like if you have a million different loudnesses that you can play like one note at, I mean, are you gonna hear the difference? Maybe, maybe not. Also, it's gonna be a lot of files in your computer. That's no good. You don't want that. Okay. So let's say that we had a bit of a more complex instrument. So the piano, we thought about different ways we could play it, like 440 files. We could really easily identify those, right? Because it's a percussion instrument, percussion and string, right? So let's say we had a string section, or like a tuba. This guy back here is playing the tuba, right? Or is that the French? No, it's tuba. Okay. There he is. Give me a second, I'm gonna look over my notes. Okay, so let's talk about a string section. Not quite a piano, a little bit different, but a string section, I think it has a very sort of recognizable sound, right? Like that is the sound of what strings sound like. We could imagine getting a collection of players together, having them record a bunch of notes, and we can imagine creating a sound like that. Like the sound of a string section, it's complex, but somewhere between, say, a string section, like a string section will live somewhere, say, between a piano and a single person playing the violin. The problem with one person playing the violin is that sounds very complex, and the reason for that is because there are lots of ways to play the violin. If you've ever listened to someone learning to play the violin, this is why it sounds as it does. It's because there are just too many possibilities, and learning to get the note that you want in tune with your bow going exactly the way you want it to go, it's complicated. In fact, it's honestly too complicated to do. Like, if you create a sampler instrument of a solo violinist, you can get a pretty long way, but I play the viola and I'm always gonna know it's a sampler violin. Because it's just, the technology, we're just not there yet. I don't know if we ever will be, to be honest with you. That's how I feel about it. So, how do I get a violinist? I'm gonna hire a violinist, right? I'm gonna take my musical idea, I'm gonna put it onto sheet music because I know how to read sheet music, very important, and I'm gonna give it to the violinist, I'm gonna hire them, put them in a room with a microphone, $75 an hour, $150 an hour, $300 an hour, really depends on who you're hiring, right? But if you want a violin that sounds like a realistic violin, if you want something that sounds like a person playing the violin, hire a person to play the violin, right? Now, how's that gonna sound? That depends on a lot of different things. Depends on the quality of the performer. Like, who is it that you're hiring? Is it someone who's been in the Seattle Symphony for like 20 years? Is it someone who's working on a graduate school degree? Is it someone working on a high school? Are they in high school? Do they play with a local community orchestra? Like, it depends, people there at different skill levels, right? The quality of the performance. Like, are they tired, sleepy? I mean, you don't have to worry about that too much, but I mean, someone's having an off day, maybe you do like 10 extra takes of that one thing that you want to do, right? What room are you recording in? Bathroom? Basement? Professional recording studio? That one sounds good. That sounds like a good idea, okay? What is the quality of your microphone? Did you buy a mic for like 20 bucks on Amazon? Or did you find something for like 500 bucks or like $3,000 or other ridiculous amounts of money, right? How good is the mic that you're using? What is the quality of the microphone? This is one of the many differences between you and Jay-Z, right? I'm gonna read my excerpt here, because I love reading this excerpt. Okay. He knows how to deliver a performance. He's a seasoned professional. He's been doing this for decades, years and years and years, okay? He's working with top-notch equipment, top-notch recording studios. Lots of money has gone into these things. He's working with engineers who have decades of experience, right? Amazing and professional recording spaces, producers creating instrumentals. Like, these people making these beats have also been working for decades. They also have the top-notch equipment. They've also been doing all of these things. Like, this is why these songs sound the way that they do, because of all of the work and honestly, all of the money that's going into them, right? Here's another transition slide, it's adorable. Okay, so we were talking about recording. We were talking about creating recordings. The thing about creating a sound recording is that sound is sound wherever it comes from. So I've got a mic, I can record myself banging on the table. I can put that into my music. I could record this adorable dog barking. That would be nice. I think that would be nice. You can get an old vinyl. You can get a viral video on YouTube, right? The Bed Intruder song, remember that? They took that interview and they cut it up and they added stuff to it and they made a song. Or you could take an a cappella instrumental of Jay-Z. Now you have Jay-Z in your computer, right? Great, good stuff. So let's see, we have MIDI, we have piano. What do I do for drums? I want to get some drums. I don't have drums, I don't play the drums, okay? Look at this. 8 sample packs, 3 MIDI packs, what does that say? Deep Premium Volume 2, future bass drums. I like future bass, that's a genre I've heard of. I'll get some future bass drums, sounds perfect. Get on the internet, buy these, download them, do whatever I need to do. Okay, now I've got some drums. Logic Pro, the DAW that I use, has like a ton of loops in it that are royalty free. They came with the software, so like you buy the software, you get the drums. I chop those up, I got bass drums now. I got cymbals, I got everything I need, right? Let's see. So edit them, chop them, put them together. Now your music, whatever it is, it has drums in it. Perfect. So let's see, we got the piano, maybe some strings, maybe we recorded someone to play the violin, we stole a Jay-Z acapella from the internet. What if I want electronic sounds though? What if I want to play like electronic sounds the same way that I play the piano? Okay, we're going to talk about synthesizers. They're a thing. I'm going to explain them to you now. Okay. I'm going to make a box. I'm going to make a little box with electricity in it. And put it right here, so it's floating in the air. Is this good?
You're good.
I'm going to put a box, it's floating in the air. I'm going to call it an oscillator. I don't remember why exactly, but that's what I'm going to call it. Okay, this is the box. It's got electricity in it again. It's called an oscillator. Here's what it does. That's it. That's all it does. That's not music. So, make another box, okay? I'm going to call this a gate. It's going to open, it's going to close, okay? Box here, oscillator, gate. I'm going to take a wire for transmitting, electricity. I'm going to plug it into the oscillator, plug it into the gate. This is what it does now. The gate has a button on it. I'm going to press it, but I don't have enough hands. So, gate, button, oscillator, gate, wire. Bang! Okay, that's what it does. All right. At some point during this exercise, I connected speakers, so there are wires going from the oscillator to the speakers. Don't forget about those. But it's still, that's no good. So I'm going to get a piano, okay? I'm going to keyboard piano-shaped object. I'm going to plug that into the gate and into the oscillator. Okay. But that still sounds real bad. So, sound, it doesn't do that. That's not what sound does. Even as I'm doing that now, like, there's kind of a, like, right? Like, it's very quick, but it kind of comes in, and then it goes down, goes out. That's what sound does. Like, if I snap my fingers, there's a clear beginning, middle, end, whatever. So, I'm going to take another box, because it's all about boxes, right? I'm going to call it an envelope. It's going to be an ADSR. That's another thing I'm going to call it. Okay. ADSR, that stands for attack, decay, sustain, release. Okay? You remember the curve I drew earlier? Right? That's essentially what this is doing. Honestly, I think attack, decay, it's kind of quick. I mean, we could make it weird, but we're not going to. So attack, decay, sustain, release. I'm going to put that in there, plug it into the gate, actually, because that's the thing that's opening and closing, and then start playing some music. That's more musical. It's still, it's not the best sound, but it's our sound. Okay, that's good. So I've got wires, I've got boxes. Cool. I'm gonna add like 30 more boxes, like that do lots of different things. There's electricity everywhere. We've got wires, it's flowing through, like we're adjusting the signal, making different things happen. Eventually, once I've connected a bunch of boxes together, I get wah, 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 wah. That's what it does now. Okay, cool. So, lots of wires, lots of boxes. I want to remember this, because what if I want to change, like, what if I want to turn some knobs or make it different? I need to remember what I did, because I had, well, that was nice. I might use that, but I want that too. So I guess I'll like take a picture of the wires and the boxes and the knobs, or because we have computers, I'm gonna hit save. That's better. So we've got a synthesizer in the computer. It's a software synthesizer. It's a soft synth. That's what we have. Cool. So I have two different sounds, meh, meh, and wow, wow, dubstep, right? Two different sounds. I'm going to call those patches, two different patches. One synthesizer, two sounds, like infinite sound possibilities, different configurations of boxes and wires and knobs. Two patches, one synthesizer. When we did with the wires and we were plugging them in, we call that patching. We call the wires patch cables. Again, I don't remember why. But, okay, one synthesizer, lots of patches. Great. Okay, so we have sampler instruments. So we have recordings of pianos that people have made. We haven't made them. Other people have done that for us, so we buy the piano. or the harp, or the guitar, or the tuba. That one came up earlier. Okay, sampler instruments, great. We have audio recordings. We have drum loops, like drums, and they loop, they play over and over again. So I've got some piano stuff, I wrote some music, got some drum loops, the Jay-Z acapella we stole, and then a couple of synthesizers, all right? We're gonna take all of that stuff, we got lots of tracks, lots of music kind of going, we're gonna play it all together. We're gonna kind of render all of these different files like down to two, one on the left, the right speaker, stage left, and the left speaker. And one of the reasons we're going to do that is because a minute of silence on the computer is the same size as a minute of like white noise. That's because it's just data like telling us what sounds are happening. So even if no sounds are happening, that still takes up like space. So if we had like 50 loops, that's like maybe like 50 loops for 1 minute, that's 50 megabytes, that's not going to fit on my iPod. That's no good. So I need a small MP3 file that I can then download to my portable player or stream from Spotify because it's 2018. That's what we need, that's what we want, that's what the people want. Okay, great. The process of taking all of these and moving it into like those two files is called bouncing, so we're gonna bounce that file. I don't remember why it's called bouncing, it has something to do with reel-to-reel tape, really don't remember. Okay, oh, this is important. Let's say, so forget all of the stuff that I just said, and let's say that we're just gonna record people. We're gonna get a guy on the drums, the bass, guitar, and a keyboard. And put them in a room and tell them all to play, and it sounds like a mess, but there it is. So we're gonna like turn some things down, turn some things up, maybe put some stuff in the right speaker, put some stuff in the left speaker. We're gonna mix it together. That's what I'm going to say about mixing for today. There's more than that. What else? Let's say, that was cool, that was in my basement. I wish it sounded like it was in a church, so I'm gonna get an effect called a reverb, so that it reverberates like it's in a church. I'm gonna hit the church button. Now it sounds like it's in a church. Neat. All right, cool. And let's see. So I talked about, the other thing I talked about was recording that piano. I talked about the 440 files, or like 880 files. Like, honestly, the more like things that we record, the more time we take to record all of those discrete samples, the more work and energy and time and eventually money that we put into that, the more like realistic it's going to sound. I'm not going to say better, but I'm going to say more realistic. Like, if you're making a multi-billion-dollar film, you probably want your strings to sound realistic. Even if you're not going to hire an orchestra to do it, they need to sound real, because that's the sound that you're looking for. That's the sound that you expect in that context. If you're making like an old school Nintendo game, it doesn't need to sound like a $30,000, that's cheap. It doesn't need to sound like an expensive orchestra. One might argue that maybe even your movie doesn't need to sound that way, but that's an argument, that's a discussion, it's an artistic thing that you can discuss, right? Okay, so there's that. Here's a little bit of contact information. I'm going to throw that up at the end though, because I'm actually going to open up a file, a piece of music that I made in my music software, and show you guys that. Okay, so we talked about some tracks earlier, that's good. So we see a bunch of different tracks here. We have a punchy rock bass, strings, affectionately named, string ensemble, etc., etc. So these green segments, or these green regions, these are MIDI regions that are being played back by sampled instruments, or sampler instruments, right? And these blue ones, all of the blue ones, are actually audio segments. You'll see that there are a bunch of gray segments in here too. Those are actually just not making sound. I have a very strange process where I don't delete those, and that's why they're there. So, I'm going to solo these blue tracks, and we're going to listen to the audio file. The blue stuff, this is a drum segment. Okay, so that's what that sounds like. And let's see. So here we have some strings. I'm going to scroll up for a second. My computer's running a little slow, but I'm going to deal with that. And we see this piano here. We're going to call that a piano roll, because it's like we took a piano and rolled it out. That's it. Then we've got some notes here. one other thing I should mention. Look, I can do that. Sheet music. Great. Cool. 1 second. And I'm just going to solo the bass and the strings, and we're going to listen to what that sounds like. Cool. Okay. So what I'm going to try to do, is I'm going to play through this, and as it's playing, I'm going to try to select some points of musical interest, excuse me. So like when a new part comes in, I'll try to like highlight over it, maybe open it up so we can kind of see what's happening. And I'm going to kind of follow along. Tell you what this is. This is a piece of music that is actually inspired by music that is inspired by Chrono Trigger. So there's Chrono Trigger soundtrack, and then there's an in-development game called Crosscode, which has art, assets, and music that's heavily inspired by Chrono Trigger. And then there's this piece of music that I made. So Chrono Trigger, Crosscode, and then this. This is called, what's this called? Dawn's Rise is what it's called. And that is essentially it. So it's about... Thank you. So that is about 1 minute and 30 seconds before it loops. It's kind of a standard sort of length that you see a lot in old school video game music. And it just kind of goes back to the beginning, not really a smooth... Yeah, this is and it just kind of goes back to the beginning. It's not what I would describe as a smooth loop. The reason I did that is because Chrono Trigger's loops are sometimes not smooth. So I was, okay, that's what I did. And that's it.
Yeah.